German manufacturer Amatix says its IP1 22 caliber handgun is designed for safety. The gun is implanted with an electronic chip that allows it to be fired only if the shooter is wearing a companion watch into which a pin number has been entered. But if the watch is taken further than 10 inches away from the gun, a red light will come on and the weapon won't fire. The Amatix system could be adapted for hobby gun owners who want to keep their weapons secure from children, or for law enforcement officers. If the gun is taken during a scuffle, it becomes practically useless.
It is the stuff science fiction and James Bond movies are made of, a handgun that will not fire unless it is print matched to the owner. But that is just the beginning of a technology that is seeking to curb handgun violence by making them smart, which then raises plenty of questions about how well it would work. And what about the tens of thousands of weapons already out there? Welcome to MidPoint, executive editor of American Hunter magazine and author of 3 books, including The Future of the Gun, Frank Miniter. Frank, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
Frank, is this really a logical answer? Because again, there are so many people who say there's thousands of guns out there already, it's not going to help them any. So why start here?
You know, I don't mind smart guns. In fact, I like the technology. I think it's interesting and there are great niches for the technology. The problem I have with smart gun technology is the same a lot of gun owners do, is that the other side, the anti-gun side, wants it to be made mandatory. And this is a new technology. They're just starting to touch the marketplace. Making it mandatory means that every other gun becomes banned.
Now, we're looking at some videotape here of the NRA, National Rifle Association, and there are those, including yourself in your article, that point out that the truth, and I'm going to quote you here, the truth is the NRA hasn't presented an official position on smart guns, and that's not unusual. How so?
Yeah, they don't usually come out with a policy on a new technology. They let the marketplace decide if it's going to make it in the marketplace. Really very simple. The NRA does say, and the National Shooting Sports Foundation, that it shouldn't be made mandatory. It's a real threat. Because you look at New Jersey, there's a law that's been on the books there since 2002 that requires that when a smart gun comes to market, the Attorney General of that state has to decide that has come to the market, that every gun sold in New Jersey then has to be a so-called smart gun, a gun that can identify you so it knows who you are, and if a bad guy picks it up, it doesn't go off for him. You mentioned the Armitex. There's also one called the IntelliGun out of Kodiak Arms. That's a conversion kit for a model 1911 pistol. That uses actually a biometric scanner on the gun's grip, so when you pick it up, you don't need a bracelet. You don't have to fumble around in the dark to put on a bracelet if there's a bad guy break into your house, for example. It will just recognize you and go off. But again, if you mandate the technology, I was told this over and over again as I was writing The Future of the Gun and visiting firearms manufacturers, that they're not investing in this technology because of threats to make it mandatory. You can't retrofit this to all the guns now available. It's a new technology that uses a battery inside of a gun. So you're telling a gun owner to pick up this new technology. It's the only technology they can use. You know, a good analogy for this is if you said all automobiles that use gas-powered engines are illegal and you can only drive electric cars. That's what making mandatory is like.
Now, let me also point out, too, and you talked about the NRA here. Here was an article in USA Today that came out just a few weeks ago, and it pointed out that the main opponent, I want to go back to the NRA here because it still seems rather odd that they wouldn't say anything like about this, because usually if anything is a gun-related issue, the NRA is right there on top of it. In this article, it points out that they will not speak. The Springfield, Missouri news leader left 6 messages on the phone and with a secretary over 2 weeks for the one spokesman designated to talk to the media. The organization did not reply. Isn't it still rather odd the NRA wouldn't have something to say about this? You would think they would be incensed.
On their website is their position, saying we don't have a problem with smart gun. They don't say we don't have a problem, but they take no position on smart gun technology. What they say is that if it's made mandatory, that's what they're opposed to. The National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is the trade association for firearms manufacturers, says that same thing and takes it a step further, worrying about this being made mandatory as they vet that out. And I quote their head attorney, Larry Keene, on that issue. That's the threat, and that's what's stopping it now. Right now, gun control groups are pointing to the NRA and to gun rights people and saying they're stopping the technology from coming. But no, if the threats for making it mandatory weren't on the table, if that wasn't the conversation, then gun owners wouldn't have a problem with this because there are great places for it. Imagine a prison guard, for example. That's a place where that gun could really be used against him. That'd be a great place to try this out. That maker of the IntelliGun has already had some placed in schools. They're actually in a gun safe and a lockbox that no one knows is there except for a few people. who are authorized to use it, they can touch a biometric scanner on the box. It opens up inside as a smart gun with this biometric scanner on its grip, the IntelliGun. They can then respond to a potential murderer in the school in seconds instead of minutes it might take a cop to get there. Those are good uses for the product, but making it mandatory, it just stops the whole marketplace.
Frank, then, your own opinion then, is this a weakening of the Second Amendment, in your opinion again?
Making it mandatory is a tremendous weakening of the Second Amendment. Letting it just go into the marketplace is just another cool thing entering the marketplace. I also argue that you could actually put cameras, video cameras, and I've talked to gun engineers about this, into police officers' guns. That way, when they actually draw the gun, you're looking down the barrel of what they're seeing. That way, when we have things like Ferguson happen, we'd actually see what the cop saw and understand how quickly he had to respond to whatever threat that was. That would help us right there, watch the watchers for just, to put it that way, but also to safeguard the police so we know right away what really happened.
Is this something of an insult to gun owners, though, when you look at it? Because many of them will say that we are responsible gun owners. Certainly, we've had these debates before, and a lot of those folks will say we're responsible, we hang on to it, we do the right things. But there's always that one or two individuals who are not responsible, who don't do the right things, who let it fall into the hands of their kids, their children, their 6, 7, 8-year-old kids. So wouldn't this really be a good idea, just if you could save one life?
That's why I'm not opposed to it. If you make it mandatory, you've just shut it down. It's not going to happen. They're not going to invest in it. You're going to have gun owners up against it. Why not work with gun owners to let this technology come to the market and find the places where it's really needed, so that homeowner who has children and will feel better and think this is a good safety device for them to have, let them have this device. Let the marketplace decide. And that's the only way that this product is going to be vetted. It's going to become better. I mean, we don't know. I haven't shot either of these smart guns yet. Neither of them are available now on the market in America. The IntelliGun is coming very soon. I've talked to the president of that company. He said in the next week or two, he's actually going to have the product coming off the line. So it's coming, but it's just not here yet. Let's let the marketplace decide.
The other thing to point out, too, is this is new technology. And as I pointed out at the beginning, this is almost James Bondian, if you will. This has got a little science fiction tag to it right here. I remember the recent James Bond movie where they talked about the fact that he said the gun is printed to your hand. Only you can biometrically fire the gun. Well, it's all wonderful to hear, but this is not perfected in any way. I'm curious about a lot of the research you did here and talking about it and looking at this to see how long it would be before something like this would be as infallible as they can make it.
Yeah, it's coming to the market and it's coming fast. And either way, even if there's talks of mandate, it's going to happen. This is going to come to the marketplace. So I think that's why I'm partly behind it. I mean, I'm not against it. I'm just against it being made mandatory. But when you look at the future of the gun, which I dug into in this book, this is a little sliver of what's to come. There's a lot more happening now as engineers look at guns and say, look what we can do with them. In 10 years, we won't recognize the guns we're seeing today. That's how fast it's changing.
Well, a couple of minutes I have left then. Give me an idea then, because we're talking about some of the things on the future of the gun. Certainly there's also the Matrix IP1 gun, and that's got the smart gun only, which I guess you have to have a special watch that fires only if the user is wearing a special watch that is also there. But what else are we looking at here then? What's coming?
Well, look at the tracking point scope as a good example. It's a digital optic that marries the optic to the trigger system, so that you actually tag a target at a great distance by looking through this. You zoom in using this digital optic at a great distance, tag the target you want, and that scope will actually follow that exact point on that target. When you pull the trigger, the gun won't go off until everything is in line. The bullet drop, bullet windage. It actually takes into account for rotation of the earth. I mean, on and on. It does all the math, so that bullet hits the exact spot that you wanted to hit. So you don't make shooter errors, so you miss that spot. Well, once you start to come up with that technology, and that's available on the marketplace right now, then you start to have really interesting things. For example, a military person, and there's the military is putting a lot of money into these kinds of projects. A one-shot program is what they call it. Can set it so that for the drop, so they can engage targets 300 yards. So bullet drop, windage, everything would be set right into the computer. That way, they could engage targets that can't effectively shoot back at them, changing the battlefield for the infantryman right there in the field. That's the kind of thing that you see once you begin to marry the trigger system with a digital optic. Really, I mean, just play with the sci-fi in your mind and see what you could do with it. Look at your camera, for example. It will find a human face in that camera. Your gun scope could do the same thing. It could decide, here's where you want to hit that target, so it would find that human shape and hit the target in that spot for you. It just goes on and on. This is the beginning of what we're at, where you're going to see just in the next decade.
You have already made a lot of people, I think some people scared, and some people actually might be looking forward to this as well, because maybe it'll make the occasional person who needs it a little more responsible when it comes down to what they're doing with guns. Hey, it's a fascinating topic. We have to keep watching this as well, because Lord only knows where we're going to go with this, and you've already opened up a bunch of things on the science fiction side of things. Frank Miniter, thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk again.
Thank you.
All right, later on this hour, primaries and the foreign policy threat from ISIS are making rounds inside the Beltway. And that's where we will find John Gizzi. Sometimes we have to get him there. We have to let him out because Lord only knows what it might do to his psyche if he stays there all the time. And after the break, the Money Master checks the street and where the Burger King might be heading next. Oh, think of the horror of what it'll do to American fast food.